She followed a girl stealing bread and uncovered a devastating secret. Now, with the truth revealed, their lives will never be the same. Mary Johnson was arranging the freshly baked bread in the display of her bakery, Johnson's Bakery. The irresistible aroma of fresh bread and sweets filled the air, inviting customers to come in. It was an ordinary morning, and Mary felt satisfied with the steady flow of customers. Her regular patrons greeted her with warm smiles, and she returned the same cordiality. While Mary was attending to a customer, she noticed a girl entering the bakery. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 12 years old, had a restless look. Her eyes quickly scanned the shelves as if searching for something specific. Mary discreetly observed as the girl grabbed some bread and hid it under her coat. Her heart raced. What would make a child steal food? Mary wondered. She called her employee Lisa and quickly explained the situation. "Lisa, I need you to take care of the bakery for a moment. I'm going to follow that girl." "Something's wrong." Lisa nodded confidently. "Go ahead, Mary. I'll handle it." Mary hurried out of the bakery, trying not to lose sight of the girl. The girl walked quickly, almost running through the busy neighborhood streets. Mary's heart beat faster with each step. Is she alone? Where are her parents? These questions echoed in Mary's mind as she followed the girl. The neighborhood was a mix of old houses and small businesses, but as they walked, the scenery began to change. The streets became narrower and more deserted, with abandoned buildings and graffiti on the walls. Mary felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Where are we going?" she thought. As she walked, Mary noticed the details of the surroundings. The well-kept houses gave way to dilapidated structures with broken windows and fallen doors. She saw children playing in vacant lots, their faces dirty and clothes tattered. How do these children survive here? She wondered, her heart aching. The girl turned a corner and entered an old, decaying house. Mary stopped outside, looking at the building. "I have to find out more," she decided, carefully approaching and peeking through a broken window. What she saw made her heart tighten. The girl, whom she would later discover was named Sarah, was sharing the bread with a small boy, probably her brother. They ate with desperate hunger. The interior of the house was dirty, with few pieces of furniture and no signs of any adults. Mary stood there silently, feeling a mix of compassion and determination. How can these children live like this? She thought. She knew she needed to do something. But what? Finally, Mary decided it was time to return to the bakery. As she walked back, her thoughts were racing. I need to find a way to help these children, she decided. When she arrived at the bakery, Lisa was waiting for her with a curious look. So, what happened? Mary sighed, still processing everything she had seen. Lisa, I saw something today that I can't ignore. I need some time to think about what to do. That girl and her brother, they're in a terrible situation. Lisa nodded understandingly. We'll figure something out, Mary. I'm sure we'll find a way to help. Mary thanked her and returned to work, but her mind was elsewhere. She knew she needed to talk to her husband, John, about what she had seen. Together, they would find a solution. Mary couldn't get the image of the two hungry children and the ruined house out of her mind. As she worked in the bakery the next day, her hands moved automatically, but her thoughts were racing. Every customer she served, every bread she sold seemed distant, as if she were in another place. Lisa's words from the night before resonated in her mind. We'll figure something out, Mary. During her lunch break, Mary grabbed a cup of tea and sat in a quiet corner of the bakery. She looked out the window at the busy streets, thinking about the stark reality she had discovered the day before. How can these children live like this while we're here comfortable and safe? She wondered. The contrast between the two realities was painful. Later, when the rush in the bakery subsided, Mary took advantage of a moment of calm to call John. John, we need to talk when you get home. Something important happened yesterday. Of course, Mary. I'll be home around 6. See you then, John replied, his voice conveying concern. Time seemed to drag until John finally arrived home. Mary was waiting for him in the kitchen, where she had prepared a simple dinner. The kitchen, with its cozy warmth and the smell of homemade food, contrasted sharply with the image of the ruined house that still haunted Mary. John, I need to tell you about something that happened yesterday. It was something that shook me deeply, Mary began as she served dinner. John listened attentively as Mary recounted the story of the girl who had stolen bread, the chase to the abandoned house, and the deplorable conditions in which Sarah and Tommy lived. He noticed the seriousness in Mary's voice and the sadness in her eyes. Mary, that's terrible. Those children need help. But what can we do? We're not social workers, and we don't have many resources, John said, pondering their limitations. I know, John, but we can't just ignore this. I thought about seeking some help, maybe talking to the community or even the authorities. But I'm afraid they might be separated, Mary replied, her voice filled with concern. You're right. We need to be careful. Maybe we can start by helping directly, bringing food and clothes while we think of a long-term solution, John suggested, trying to find a middle ground. Mary nodded, feeling a bit more relieved. Yes, I think that could work. We can bring some things to them tomorrow and see how they react. Maybe we can gain their trust and gradually find a better solution. John placed his hand over Mary's. We're in this together, Mary. We'll find a way to help those children. That night, Mary slept a little more peacefully, knowing she wasn't alone in this endeavor. Together, she and John would find a way to make a difference in Sarah and Tommy's lives. The next morning, Mary and John were determined to help Sarah and Tommy. They got up early and started preparing a basket with food, clothes, and some toys they had bought the night before. The atmosphere in the house was one of concentration and urgency. Mary wanted to make sure everything was perfect. John, do you think this will be enough to start? Mary asked, examining the contents of the basket. It's a good start, Mary. Let's go slowly, earning their trust. Then we can think about ways to help in the long term, John replied, trying to reassure her. Mary nodded, grabbing the basket and leaving the house with John. The path to the abandoned house seemed shorter this time, perhaps because Mary already knew what to expect. The difference now was the hope that they could do something to change the children's situation. When they arrived, Mary knocked softly on the door. After a few moments, Sarah opened it with a cautious but hopeful look. Hi, Mary, she said, her voice still hesitant. Hi, Sarah. We brought some things for you and Tommy, Mary replied with a welcoming smile. She looked at John and added, This is my husband, John. He's here to help too. John smiled at Sarah, trying to seem as friendly as possible. Hi, Sarah. It's nice to meet you. Sarah opened the door a bit more, allowing Mary and John to enter. The interior of the house looked even more desolate in the daylight. The smell of mold and dirt was strong, and the sight of the children's few possessions scattered around the room was disheartening. Tommy was sitting in a corner, playing with a broken toy. Mary placed the basket on the floor and started taking out the items. We brought bread, fruit, juice, some clothes, and toys for you, she said, trying to keep a light tone. Sarah watched carefully, still wary, but necessity spoke louder. Thank you, Mary, she said, picking an apple from the basket and handing it to Tommy, who took it with a shy smile. John knelt next to Tommy. Hi, Tommy. I'm John. We brought some things to make you feel better. Tommy looked at John with curiosity. Thank you, he said in a low voice. Mary and John spent some time with the children, talking and trying to understand the situation better. Sarah explained that their mother, Jane, had left to look for work in another city and never returned. Since then, Sarah had been taking care of Tommy alone, doing her best to survive. She said she would come back, but it's been months, Sarah said, tears in her eyes. I don't know what to do. Mary felt a tightness in her heart. Sarah, We'll help you find your mother. In the meantime, we want to make sure you and Tommy are safe and well cared for." John added, "We can take you to our home. It will be easier to take care of you there and make sure you have everything you need." Sarah hesitated for a moment, looking at Tommy. "Do you promise you won't separate us?" Mary held Sarah's hand. "We promise, Sarah. Our goal is to keep you together and safe." With a sigh of relief, Sarah agreed. "Okay, we'll go with you." Mary and John helped the children pack their few belongings and then took them home. During the trip, Mary found an old photo among Sarah's things. It was the children's mother, Jane, alongside her own mother, Martha. "John, look at this. My mother knew their mother. We need to talk to her," Mary said, showing the photo. "That's an incredible coincidence, Mary. Maybe your mother can help us understand more about Jane and what happened," John replied. When they arrived home, Mary and John prepared a room for the children, ensuring they were comfortable and safe. "You'll stay here with us. It will be like a new home for you," Mary said as she made the beds. Tommy looked around with wide eyes. "This is so nice, Mary. Thank you," he said, his voice full of emotion. Sarah, though still a bit hesitant, seemed relieved. "Thank you for everything, Mary. You're saving our lives." The next morning, Mary was determined to visit her mother, Martha, taking the photo she had found among Sarah's things. She believed Martha could provide more information about Jane and what might have happened to her. Before leaving, Mary and John made sure Sarah and Tommy were well settled in their home. "John, I'm going to visit my mother today. I want to see if she knows anything about Jane," Mary said as she arranged the photo in her bag. "Sure, Mary. I'll stay here taking care of the children. They're still a bit scared, but I think they're starting to feel safer," John replied, giving Mary a kiss before she left. Mary got in the car and drove to Martha's house, a few miles away. During the trip, Mary thought about how life had changed suddenly with the discovery of Sarah and Tommy. She felt a mix of anxiety and hope. When she arrived, Mary was greeted with a warm hug from her mother. "Mary, dear, what a pleasant surprise. Come in, Martha said, guiding Mary to the living room. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important," Mary began, sitting on the couch. She took the photo out of her bag and handed it to Martha. "Do you know this woman, Mom? She's Jane Miller, Sarah and Tommy's mother." Martha took the photo, and her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Jane was like a sister to me. We went through a lot together. I didn't know she had children." Mary told everything about the children's situation, how she had found them, and the state they were living in. Martha was visibly moved. "Thank God you found them, my daughter. Do you know where Jane might be? Any clues about where she went?" Mary asked hopefully. Martha sighed and shook her head. "Unfortunately, I don't, Mary. I haven't seen Jane in years. After she moved to try to start a new life, we lost touch. Sadly, I have no idea where she might be now." Mary felt a mix of hope and frustration. "We'll keep looking, Mom. Thank you for everything." Martha held Mary's hands. "I'm so proud of you, my dear. Taking care of those children is a big responsibility, but I know you and John are the right people for it." Back home, Mary found John and the children in the living room, playing a board game. The scene warmed her heart. "Hi, everyone. How are things here?" Mary asked, entering the room. "We're having fun, Mary. John is teaching us a new game," Sarah said with a smile. "That's great, Sarah. We need to talk a bit," Mary said, calling John to the kitchen. She told John about the conversation with Martha and the lack of concrete information about Jane's whereabouts. "My mother hasn't seen Jane in years. She has no idea where she might be. We'll need to investigate more on our own." John nodded. "Let's do that, Mary. In the meantime, we need to ensure the children are safe and well cared for. I thought about talking to a lawyer about the possibility of applying for temporary custody, at least until we find Jane." Mary agreed. "Yes, I think that's a good idea. We can't let them go back to that ruined house. Let's give them the security they need." In the following days, Mary and John dedicated themselves to creating a safe and welcoming environment for Sarah and Tommy. The first step was to establish a routine that provided stability and comfort for the children. Getting up early, having breakfast together, helping Sarah with her studies, and playing with Tommy were now integral parts of their lives. "Good morning, everyone," Mary said, entering the kitchen where John was preparing breakfast. Sarah and Tommy were sitting at the table, looking more relaxed each day. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, Mary," Sarah replied with a smile. "It was the best night's sleep I've had in a long time." Mary smiled and joined them at the table. "That's great, Sarah. Today, we're going to take you to see the local school and then visit a lawyer to talk about how to ensure you stay safe here." After breakfast, Mary and John took the children for a walk around the neighborhood, showing them important places and introducing them to some friendly neighbors. Sarah seemed excited about the idea of going back to school, while Tommy, more shy, held John's hand tightly. "You'll like the school. It's a place where you can learn, make friends, and have fun," John said, trying to reassure Tommy. After the walk, Mary and John took Sarah and Tommy to the office of a family friend and lawyer, Mr. Thompson. He welcomed them warmly and listened attentively as Mary explained the situation. "Mr. Thompson, we found Sarah and Tommy living in deplorable conditions without any responsible adults. Their mother has been missing for months, and we want to ensure they stay safe and together while we look for her," Mary said. Mr. Thompson frowned, visibly concerned. "I understand, Mary. You're doing the right thing by taking care of these children. We'll start the process of temporary custody to ensure you can legally care for them. This will give them the necessary protection while we search for their mother." John held Mary's hand, feeling relieved they were on the right path. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We want to do everything correctly." The lawyer began explaining the steps of the process, the necessary documents, and the time it might take. He also suggested ways to search for Jane, including using social media and old contacts. "We'll start this immediately," Mary said, determined. Back home, Mary and John started organizing the necessary documents and planning the search for Jane. They knew the process could be long and difficult, but they were determined to find the children's mother. During this time, Mary and John also dedicated themselves to getting to know Sarah and Tommy better. Sarah was a smart and responsible girl, clearly matured before her time due to the circumstances. She loved reading and was eager to go back to school. "Mary, do you think I can go back to school soon?" Sarah asked while helping Mary prepare dinner. "Of course, Sarah. We'll make it happen as soon as possible. School is very important, and you deserve that opportunity," Mary replied with an encouraging smile. Tommy, on the other hand, was still adapting to the new reality. He was shy and introverted, but gradually began to open up, especially with John, who took him to play ball in the park. "Tommy, do you like soccer?" John asked, watching the boy kick the ball enthusiastically. "Yes, John. I always wanted to play, but I never had a real ball," Tommy replied with a sparkle in his eyes. John smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. "Well, now you have one. We'll play whenever you want." Every day, the relationship between Mary, John, Sarah, and Tommy grew stronger. They were becoming more than caregivers. They were becoming a family. The uncertainty about Jane's whereabouts still loomed over them, but Mary and John's determination to give the children a safe and loving home was unwavering. Days turned into weeks, and Mary and John worked diligently to give Sarah and Tommy a more stable life. The children returned to school, where Sarah quickly stood out for her intelligence and dedication. Tommy, initially shy, began making friends and enjoying school activities. Both their physical and emotional health improved daily, but the absence of their mother remained a constant shadow. "Mary, today the teacher said I'm doing very well in school." "I was so happy," said Sarah, her eyes shining as she helped Mary prepare dinner. "That's wonderful, Sarah. I'm so proud of you. And you, Tommy, how was your day?" Mary asked, turning to the boy. "I played soccer with my friends. It was so much fun," Tommy replied, smiling shyly. Despite the progress, the children still missed their mother deeply. Mary and John did their best to provide love and security, but they knew Jane's presence was irreplaceable. One quiet afternoon, while Mary was reviewing some documents with Mr. Thompson at home, he brought unexpected news. "Mary, I managed to get some important information about Jane. It seems she's detained in the neighboring city. Apparently, she was unjustly imprisoned and had no way to inform anyone." Mary's heart leaped. "Are you sure, Mr. Thompson? This explains why she didn't return to the children. We need to go there immediately." Mr. Thompson agreed. "I'll accompany you, Mary. We need to clarify this situation as soon as possible." Mary explained to John and the children that she needed to leave with Mr. Thompson for a while. "We need to resolve something very important." "Don't worry. We'll be back soon," Mary said, trying to hide the anxiety in her voice. Mary and Mr. Thompson drove to the neighboring city and went straight to the local prison. After some bureaucratic procedures, they were taken to a visitation room. Jane looked visibly worn out, but her eyes lit up when she saw Mary and Mr. Thompson. "Jane, I'm Mary, Martha's daughter. I found your children." "Actually, Sarah found me," Mary said, emotional. Jane began to cry with relief and gratitude. "Mary, are my children okay? I tried to return, but I was imprisoned and couldn't inform anyone. I have no one to help me." "Your children are safe with us, Jane. We're here to resolve this. With Mr. Thompson's help, we'll prove your innocence and get you out of here," Mary promised. Mr. Thompson immediately began working on the case, reviewing documents and gathering evidence. "We'll schedule a hearing to reassess your case, Jane. Don't worry. We're here to help," he said confidently. Mary and Jane talked a bit more, exchanging information and trying to reassure Jane about the children's situation. "They miss you, Jane, but they're safe and well cared for. We'll bring you back to them," Mary assured as they said goodbye. In the following days, Mary and John continued to care for Sarah and Tommy, keeping them busy with school and activities at home. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson worked tirelessly on Jane's case, gathering all the necessary evidence for the hearing. Mary and John supported as much as they could, always attentive to the children's needs and ensuring they felt safe and loved. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. Mary and John were nervous but confident. They had left Sarah and Tommy under Lisa's care, explaining that it was an important day and they needed to resolve a situation to bring their mother back. "Today is the day, John. We need to stay calm and trust that we've done everything we could," Mary said as they prepared to leave. "Everything will be fine, Mary. We're doing this for Jane and the children," John replied, holding her hand firmly. When they arrived at the courthouse, they found Mr. Thompson waiting for them. "Are we ready? We have all the necessary evidence to prove Jane's innocence," he said confidently. The hearing began, and Mary, John, and Mr. Thompson sat in the front row while Jane, visibly nervous, was in the defendant's seat. The judge started the session, and Mr. Thompson presented the evidence and testimonies clearly and convincingly. He brought testimonies from Jane's former co-workers and the confession of the real culprit, confirming the mistaken identity. Mary and John watched attentively, feeling the tension in the air. During the presentation of evidence, they exchanged looks of support and hope. Jane was visibly emotional but maintained her composure, knowing this was her moment to prove her innocence. After hours of testimonies and evidence presentation, the judge finally made his statement. "Based on the presented evidence and heard witnesses, I declare that Jane Miller is innocent of the charges. She is free to go." Jane couldn't contain her tears of relief. Mary and John smiled broadly, feeling a huge weight lifted off their shoulders. Jane was released, and Mary ran to hug her. "Mary, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life, Jane said, crying with happiness. You don't need to thank me, Jane. We just did what was right. Now let's take you back home to your children, Mary replied with tears in her eyes. John approached and hugged Jane too. We're all in this together. Let's take you home. Mr. Thompson, with a satisfied smile, approached. It was hard work, but we did it. I'm happy to help. Jane thanked Mr. Thompson and the officers present, feeling immense gratitude to everyone who helped her regain her freedom. As they left the courthouse, Mary, John, and Jane breathed a sigh of relief, knowing the worst was over. The journey back home was marked by a mix of emotion and relief. Mary and John felt happy and anxious to reunite Jane with her children. Jane, in turn, was nervous but full of hope and gratitude. She looked out the car window, absorbing her newly regained freedom, and thought about the moment she was about to experience with Sarah and Tommy. We're almost there, Jane. Sarah and Tommy will be so happy to see you, Mary said, trying to reassure Jane. I can't wait to hug them. I miss them so much, Jane replied, her voice choked with emotion. When they arrived at Mary and John's house, Jane felt a tightness in her heart. It was a welcoming place where her children had been lovingly cared for. Mary went in first, followed by John and Jane. Sarah, Tommy, come here. We have a surprise for you, Mary called, trying to contain the emotion in her voice. The children came running from the living room, curious and anxious. When they saw Jane, they stopped for a moment as if processing what they were seeing. Then they shouted in unison, Mom! Jane opened her arms, and Sarah and Tommy ran to her, enveloping her in a tight hug. My darlings, I'm so happy we're together again, Jane said, tears streaming down her face. We missed you so much, Mom. We thought we'd never see you again, Sarah said, holding her mother's hand tightly. Tommy, clinging to Jane's leg, whispered, I knew you would come back, Mom. Mary and John watched the scene with tearful eyes, feeling deep joy at reuniting the family. Martha, who was in the kitchen preparing tea, came out to see what was happening. When she saw Jane, she dropped the dish towel and ran to hug her old friend. Jane, it's so good to see you again. I'm so happy everything worked out, Martha said, tears of happiness in her eyes. Thank you, Martha. I don't know what I would have done without your daughter and son-in-law. They saved my life and my children's lives, Jane replied, emotional. The house was filled with joy and laughter, a spontaneous celebration of the reunion. Everyone sat at the table for tea prepared by Martha, and the conversation flowed naturally, full of stories, laughter, and some tears. Jane, we want you to feel comfortable here. This is your home too, for as long as you need, Mary said, holding Jane's hand. Thank you, Mary. You've done so much for us. I don't know how to thank you, Jane replied sincerely. We're all family now. And speaking of that, I wanted to make you an offer, Mary said, looking at John, who nodded with a smile. Jane, we'd like to offer you a job at the bakery. I know you need to start over, and we thought working with us could be a good way to do that, Mary said hopefully. Jane smiled, emotional. I'd love that. I've always enjoyed working with food, and it will be a pleasure to be part of your team. Thank you for this opportunity. The days that followed were filled with adaptation and reconstruction. Jane started working at the bakery, showing a natural talent for cooking. Martha helped by taking care of Sarah and Tommy, providing a loving and safe environment for the children. Martha, it's so good to be here with you. It feels like no time has passed, Jane said as they had tea together after a day's work. I feel the same way, Jane. It's wonderful to be reunited and able to support each other again, Martha replied, smiling. Mary and John watched the new dynamic with satisfaction. The house was full of life, and the bakery thrived with the new addition to the team. They knew that although the path had been difficult, the result was more than rewarding. Months passed since the emotional reunion of Jane with her children. Life had transformed into something they could only have dreamed of. Mary's bakery was more prosperous than ever, now with Jane's dedicated help. Customers noticed the new energy in the place and appreciated the personal touches Jane added to the recipes. Sarah and Tommy were flourishing. Sarah excelled in school, participating in extracurricular activities and making many friends. Tommy, once shy and withdrawn, was now a happy and confident boy who loved playing with his new friends and learning new things. At home, the dynamic was that of a big, loving family. Jane and her children had their own room, carefully and lovingly decorated by Mary and John. Martha, now a central figure in the children's lives, spent her days helping Jane and caring for Sarah and Tommy while Jane worked at the bakery. One night, after a long day of work at the bakery, Jane and Mary were in the kitchen preparing dinner. The children were in the living room, laughing and playing board games with John. "Mary, I don't know how to thank you for everything you and John have done for us. You saved my life and my children's lives," Jane said as she chopped vegetables. Mary smiled, placing a hand on Jane's shoulder. "Jane, you're part of our family now. We didn't do anything other than what any family would do. And to be honest, you brought a new light to our lives too." Martha entered the kitchen, bringing a dessert dish. "That's true, Jane. Having you and the children here has brought us so much joy. And working at the bakery with you has been wonderful. Mary and I always wanted to expand, and now that's possible." As everyone sat down for dinner, the conversation was light and filled with laughter. Jane, Martha, Mary, and John toasted to the future, with the children laughing and playing around the table. "I was thinking, Jane," Mary said as everyone started eating, "what if we formalize this partnership at the bakery? You could become our partner." Jane was surprised, her eyes filling with tears. "Mary, that would be a dream come true. I'd love that, but are you sure?" "Absolutely, Jane. You've brought so many wonderful ideas and energy to the bakery. I can't imagine continuing without you by our side," Mary replied, smiling. John nodded. "Besides, you and Martha make an unbeatable team. We're all very happy with this new phase." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.